rhetorical device and not the God's honest truth. Don't even think about running the dishwasher without Dan's blessing. Oh, you care to discard that empty box of Triscuits? Please check with Dan for the proper procedure for that. Now, these were just innocuous annoyances, partially fueled by his meticulous peculiarities, but there were two items of ultimate aggravation: people with arrogant demeanors and computer technology. Frequent was the time, late at night on West Haven, my dad in his office, laboring over a column with a looming deadline, when without explanation, all the words on the screen would suddenly disappear, presumably from some misfortunate combination of keystrokes. He would explode in a rage, shouting, "This damn machine!" He would wake up the whole family. It was always a relief when the column was complete, usually around midnight, and you always knew when he was done, because when he sent his word processor to print, it sounded like machine gun fire in the middle of the night. If we were lucky, it was only 250 words. Dad's contempt for digital technology was only eclipsed by his intolerance for arrogance. And because he chose a profession to chronicle the achievements and success of highly confident and competitive athletes, he was continuously surrounded by egos of all sizes, and therefore always at odds with his core values. And humility was an important one. Years ago, when we Coghlan kids were just beginning to compete on sports teams, Dad proudly witnessed our oldest brother, Joe, handily score a touchdown in a flag football game. And then he watched in horror as Joe spiked the ball in celebration. Dad's pride quickly turned to outrage. After the game, Dad pulled Joe aside and sternly said to him, "Act like you've been there before." It was rare for my dad to so sharply advise us. He was such a happy-go-lucky guy. So when Dad piped up, you listened. Dad has previously remarked on the indignation he felt toward a certain curmudgeonly athlete who will remain unnamed, but who batted cleanup for the Indians from 1991 to 1996. Following the departure of that player, Dad visited the Indians' locker room, and in there he observed an abandoned heap of unanswered fan mail addressed to that curmudgeon, who was arguably a hero if it were solely based off the statistics on the back of his baseball card. My dad loved to say, "There's lies, damned lies, and statistics." In spite of the possible moral paradox facing my dad, with every post-game interview, he trotted on, because bringing forth the sports stories of Cleveland is what injects vitality to this city, a place he deeply loved. The Cleveland Indians won the World Series in 1948, when Dad was the tender age of 11 years old. One of the star players that year was Lou Boudreau. And Dad has told this story before, but I'll quickly mention it again because it was formative for him. In the 1948 season, Lou Boudreau had 560 at-bats, and he only struck out 9 times. Now, with a stat like that, he was a hero by any measure. And Dad, being the sports broadcasting child prodigy that he was, recognized this legendary achievement in its time, and so he bought a Lou Boudreau postcard and mailed it to Lou in hopes that he would sign it. To my dad's delight, Lou mailed the postcard back, even making the effort to protect the postcard in a stamped envelope. Quite the heroic thing to do. To this day, a Lou Boudreau commemorative statue is the only player-specific bit of sports memorabilia that I can find in my dad's possession. And that small act from Lou set a strong example for Dad. Since his passing, we have enjoyed reading many stories and tributes addressing him as a legend within Cleveland sports. The common theme being he was wildly hilarious, joyful, and kind. He made time for people who wanted to talk to him, to tell him something funny or interesting. In some cases, he would go out of his way to connect with his supporters, even driving to see them. At the wake yesterday, so many people said they just talked to him at a game, or a handful of people had lunch with him this week. Even Dennis Kucinich saw him last week. I'm starting to think there were 3 Dan Coglins running around Cleveland. Dad had a long and fulfilling media career, but his favorite occupation to date has been as grandfather. In 2010, with the arrival of his namesake Danny, Dad became Papa. As each year passed in this exciting era of his life, he delighted to welcome each grandkid to his roster. The Coglin baby boom peaked when we welcomed 8 grandchildren in the span of 3 years. With each baby that arrived, he would exclaim, "Keep 'em coming!" Dad loved being Grandpa, especially alongside my mom. They were quite a team and yet a highly contrasting duo. When toasting my parents for their 35th wedding anniversary, my brother Mike remarked, "When my parents quit smoking, my mom used yoga to fill the void, and my dad filled his void with cherry pie." In 2018, at the age of 80, Dad was hospitalized with pneumonia. He nearly died. Given his age and quality of health, perhaps he should have. As many here know, Mom had a serious cancer diagnosis at the time and was thanking God for every season she was granted. As I reflect on that challenging time for my dad, it strikes me that surviving was the only option for him. After that time, he carried on for another 6 years, dutifully caring for my mom for 4 of those. Anytime I came to visit, I would express concern about them both carrying out household duties, and my mom would respond reassuringly, "Dad takes good care of me." He did. He wouldn't go to bed until the kitchen was spotless. Dad has stayed busy since Mom passed. One might think too busy to have had time to miss her, but he did. And although he kept a smile on his face and stayed engaged in everything like before, there was just a small spark that had gone missing. Dad had a certain little chuckle he did whenever Mom would humorously call him out for story embellishment or mishandling facts. It was fun to watch Dad tell an entertaining story and then have Mom hilariously rip it to shreds. It's hard to describe their banter, but Dad enjoyed Mom's audience because she pulled no punches. If he could get a genuine, hearty laugh out of her, he won. I can almost hear that little chuckle of his now. All right, I've carried on too long. My dad would be irritated. So, thank you, Father Lanning, for your guidance. My dad thought very highly of you. Thank you to our musicians, Danny, Joe, Danielle, and Mary Beth. This is an unprecedented musical performance. This group has never played together before. Thank you to McGorry's and St. Ed's for accommodating our family and honoring our dad yesterday. That turnout was astonishing. And finally, thanks to you all who have loved and appreciated our dad right up to the end. He went out of this world with all the optimism. Eds had beaten St. Ignatius. The Guardians led the series. His grandsons won their final football games. And he made his departure before the Browns could spoil his weekend. Dad, I'm signing off.